Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pod Mavericks playoff preview. I'm Kirk Henderson, and I'm joined today by Matthew Phillips, contributor to MavsMoneyball.com. How you doing today, Matthew?
I'm very good. Ready to take a nap whenever we get done. But other than that, I'm very good.
Well, you guys will notice that this show was twice delayed. Frankly, this has just been a little bit of a difficult week for Josh and I with both real life stuff. And you guys know that we don't do this for a job. We do it primarily for fun. And then what I used to refer to as beer money, and now I consider daycare money for both Josh and I. And so things just happened and we're here. Josh will be with us probably on Sunday, but he's had some life things occur, and we just decided, hey, you know what? It's playoff previews. There's a ton of Mavs stuff out there. If anybody wants to see it, other sites like our buddy Is Talk Franco wrote an enormous piece to everybody go read it. Dallas Magazine. There's lots of stuff out there if you're at all interested in what's going on in Mavs world. Matthew and I are going to try to preview the series as best we can. But before we get started, I just wanted to point everyone, if you're at all interested, yesterday during the day, I had an interview with friend and ESPN reporter Tim Bontemps to talk a little bit about his job and also the MVP race as a whole. I think by and large, the interview was pretty well received. I've gotten some very interesting criticism, which kind of boils down to, why didn't you yell at the person you brought in on the show and demand that he answer for his war crimes in relation to MVP voting? And the simple thing, my main response to that is like, I don't really agree. Friend of the show, Jason Gallagher, kind of came on a couple of weeks ago and was like, kind of ranting, but it's very much like in the kayfabe sense. Like it was, he obviously wants Luka to be MVP, and I think we all believe that Luka is a worthy MVP, and we think people should vote for him. But I think kind of the stance that most people that think about this enough come to is that Jokic is also a pretty darn good MVP. And one of the challenging parts about MVP as a whole, I think, is that there is no actual standard for voting. Like what you determine valuable seems to change every year. And that can be very frustrating for people like, Matthew, for example, who I think is pretty annoyed at the way the voting is going. But I want to, I'm kind of past it in the sense that now I want to talk about the freaking playoffs. And I really think the Mavericks could actually do something. And so the MVP is secondary to winning a ring. So unless you have any MVP comments, I think we should just kind of hop right in. And please feel free to give your MVP comments, because I'm going to
give you a very short summation of my issue with the MVP. Jokic winning MVP this year is completely fine. However, it is logically inconsistent with at least 2 of the last 3 years of MVP results. One, Luka had a better year than Embiid did last year, and sure, Jokic was better last year than he was this year too during the regular season, and Embiid still won. Also, Jokic won an MVP with a worse record than the Mavericks, with Luka averaging more points and assists and a reasonably close amount of rebounds relative to a point guard to a center. So understand that it's basically, we've started from the last little bit here of the MVP is Jokic, and we work backwards from there to get to the rationale.
I certainly think that's how we got to Embiid last year.
Yeah, and that being said,
I think that happens a lot.
Jokic is an all-time great, so I'm annoyed about it because of how much of a foregone conclusion it's been for people, and because I don't think it makes logical. I don't think the logic is consistent with how it's been for other people. But that being said, you are correct that the actual games themselves that will happen in the playoffs will matter, and I do think that it will annoy Luka some, and that'll probably help him, because I think there's a tendency among people to kind of compartmentalize people into one of two categories, where they're either people who care about individual awards or people who care about winning. And it's just not how it works. Like, you can, like, I do not know Luka personally. I've never met Luka. I don't want anybody to pretend like I'm saying this with inside knowledge, and I am not. I'm not trying to sound more important than I am by any means. That being said, I think it will annoy Luka that he is not the MVP. Like, I think he does care about his place in the league and the level of credit that he receives. And I think, that being said, it's obviously much more important to him to win. But you can both want to win and want to be appreciated for your craft and for your dedication at it.
Absolutely.
So I do think it's probably better for the Mavs if he doesn't win. Or I say if he doesn't win, he's not going to win. Like, the results are pretty much foregone conclusion at this point. So that brings us to the actual series that is about to occur, which is a really, really interesting place to go just because of the way things can work out. Because the Clippers and the Mavs actually, it sounds weird because when you think of the Clippers, you think of obviously Kawhi and Paul George and even the other people that they have had. But you think of them so much as team wings. And for the Mavs, they have been team no wings. Yes. So you think of them polar opposites because of that. But in reality, the ways they play are actually very, very similar in that they're both extremely isolation-heavy teams. They're first and second in possession and isolation possessions per game, and they're first and second in isolation efficiency per game. The Mavs are second in possessions and first in efficiency. The Clippers are first in possessions and second in efficiency. So these are the two premier isolation basketball teams in the NBA. And they're also actually, you wouldn't think this just because of the reputations of the players on both teams, but they're actually very similar defensively in isolations. They're both pretty middle of the pack as far as defensive isolation teams. So they're actually much more similar to the way that people are as far as their play styles. And then, I like to relate everything to movie scenes. So one of the things for me, this series, if you remember in the movie Speed, like while everything is going on at the very end, when they end, or not at the very end, but at the part where they go to the airport, the one guy on the bus is like, man, I've already been to the airport. And that's how I feel about this series. Like, as great as everything's going to be, as much calamity is going on, as much as good as everything's been with the series. Like, when I found out we were going to play the Clippers again, I'm just like, man, I've already seen this. Like, can't we do something else?
I know.
And that's because that's out of an abundance of respect for the Clippers.
Absolutely.
They're just really good. And then,
that's
the
tricky
first
part.
I have one more movie quote I'll make here in a little bit.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, the tricky part for me is that I sort of felt, this is like a feeling, like pure nonsense. I started sort of tweeting that I thought this was going to be the playoff series that the Mavericks got in early March. So this has just been living in my head. When the Mavericks made all these trades, one of the Clipper guys I follow is like, that's a whole lot of trades to make just for the Clippers to beat you again. And that, that obviously hurt my feelings. And then we end up here with, the money, like I'm towards the second half of the podcast. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the betting lines, but like the money has swung all towards the Mavericks, which is fascinating. We have no idea about Kawhi Leonard's health. And I'm pretty sure what happened was Adam Silver basically told the Clippers, shit or get off the pot. You cannot continue to not give a health update on the most important player on your team. So Lawrence Frank came out yesterday and said he's questionable and that he had at least according to Shams Charania, he had a shot several weeks ago to deal with his inflammation. Only his knee is still inflamed. But he is putting in the work. So it's like the Kawhi of it all hangs over this series like the sword of Damocles. And if it doesn't come through, like if he doesn't play, that makes almost all of our talk useless because the Mavericks are going to win. And if he does play, that makes it such a fascinating series because in my kind of, big picture view, I think the Mavericks should win. I think they can win, but I think it becomes like you just sort of mentioned there, like a kind of just like a dark mirror battle between these two teams because it's going to be it might come down to sort of coaching decisions paired with what superstar performs when and at what time. Does that make any sense?
Oh, it makes a ton of sense. So for me, the way I chose to look at the Kawhi piece of this is just, and I'm hoping the Mavs are doing the same thing, and I would assume that they are. Is I would just assume that you're going to get Apex Predator Kawhi. It's much easier to adjust down to not having
more fun too.
But if they go in thinking, well, yeah, but if they go in thinking they're going to have a compromised version of Kawhi or no Kawhi, and they plan for that, and then Apex Predator Kawhi shows up, you're in trouble. But if they go in and they plan for Kawhi and they play, it's much easier to adjust to Amir Coffey playing instead of Kawhi than it is to adjust to Kawhi playing instead of Amir Coffey, is basically the way that I would say it. It's easier to it's plan for the Warriors, hope for the best. So not that I'm not that I would say that we would ever want anyone to be injured. Like I'm a fan of the sport, and I would like to see everybody at their absolute best. And Kawhi at his best is one of the very few people in the world that can match Luka at his best, or at least come close. Or depending on your fandom and how much you value playmaking versus defense, where that falls. But it's going to be very interesting. I've seen some stuff about the centers and about how the Mavs will do when the Clippers go small. I really think that the centers and how much they play on both teams is going to center on Luka and Kyrie. And the reason I say that is because obviously, if you remember the first couple of matchups, Luka played Zubac off the floor. Luka got making step backs. That's how the Clippers won the series. That's how they came back.
It took Lou 3 games to realize that he shouldn't play. And that was how they eventually destroyed the Mavericks, because the Mavericks went jumbo. And the only way the 2021-22 series was so freaking weird in hindsight. And I don't really think we can take anything away from that other than when you look at like Kristaps Porzingis now versus then. He's a completely different healthy animal. Good for him. But I'm just shocked that the Mavericks even took it to think about. They almost went up 3-0 had Rick Carlisle not called like a horrid timeout during a Mavericks run. It's that series is just it's so weird.
Minimum stopper on his own team.
They stopped. I'm so excited to talk about this series and keep going. I brought you on. I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay. So the reason that I said that they control that on both sides is obviously, so the goal would be for them to play the Clipper centers off the court, as far as, Zubac and anybody else that they would want to, Plumlee. If they can play them off the court, that's obviously an advantage. But the other side of that is Luka, for all of his defensive faults that people point out and everything, when he's engaged, his 2 primary faults are, one, obviously he can get a little lost off ball sometimes. But the big one is that he struggles getting through screens. The Clippers, when they were at their peak, they went through their 26-5 run. The biggest thing they did is they ran a whole bunch of Harden, Terrence Mann, the 2 super wings, and Zubac. And they ran a ton of Harden, Zubac pick and roll. And, they got downhill. Zubac finished. Harden shot super well during this. He shot like 42% from 3 during this or something like that. Like it was ridiculous. Like he's not the James Harden of old, but he was like 18, 10, and 5 on really good efficiency.
He's such a confusing player.
So the reason that Luka and Kyrie are so important as far as the Mavs centers being able to stay on the court in those scenarios is how well they can get over screens. Because while Gafford and Lively, I'm not sure about Lively's status right now, to be clear. Like I don't know. I haven't seen an update. I'm assuming he will play as well. Yeah. But if they can't, they're athletic and mobile enough to move and play up at the level of the screen and everything. But by and large, for them to stay on the floor a ton, Luka and Kyrie are going to have to be able to get through screens, because one of them is going to have to guard Harden. That's just, I've seen, shout out to our man Panda Hank, who makes the best highlight videos of Mavs related stuff. Look him up on YouTube if you need highlight videos for stuff to get you hyped up for this series. But I'm assuming Kawhi and Paul George, those are going to require your PJ Washingtons and your Derrick Jones Jr.'s to defend. They're going to have to be focused on them, and I'm glad to see that Kid Said Lively is good to go. They're going to have to defend them. Means that one of Luka or Kyrie is going to get Terrence Mann, and the other one's going to get James Harden. And I believe that it's going to be Luka on Harden to start with which will be interesting for a variety of reasons, to be honest. But the thing with that is it's going to put Luka's biggest defensive weakness at the forefront, because Harden still uses a ton of screens and Luka struggles with ball screens. Now, the Mavs can counter that by switching some, but that will also make them go a lot smaller, which is why if Luka can get through screens, we'll see centers on the floor all the time. If he can't, you'll see a lot of, I think, PJ Washington and or Maxey at center. I think that's just the options that they have.
So, in your opinion, is it Luka trying to get through screens, or because sometimes, like, let's just be candid, sometimes Luka doesn't try to get through screens and he wants to switch everything. I think for the Mavericks to really come out and punch the Clippers in the mouth, I think he'll need to get over them, and I think he can. It's a matter of, as our guy Xavier at Mavs Moneyball noted, the Clippers are just going to do it until he's worn out. And that's actually the really sort of, I don't want to say like scary, because that's a little bit hyperbole, but it's the concern over the long haul of like of the Clippers trying to physically wear Luka down throughout the course of the series. It's a good tactic. I'm just curious because we just don't see Luka engaged on defense for more than a certain number of possessions at a time. And I sort of think, just in my opinion, we've not played the Clippers since I think December. I think the Mavericks can really come out and shut the Clippers. Yeah, so I just think the Mavericks can come out and absolutely shut the Clippers down. Like, even if Kawhi is playing, I think they're capable of that. It's a question of, can they execute early, and then what is kind of the counterpunch from Tyronn Lue, who is Josh Bowe has sort of noted, kind of and really a lot of people I've talked to, he kind of coaches down to who he's coaching against. And Jason Kidd is a little bit of a chameleon of a coach too, where sometimes it feels like he doesn't do anything for 30 games at a time. And then obviously the last several months, he's just been absolutely on point. So I really think the Mavericks can get this one early, but I also, that just feels like an insane statement considering that the Mavericks haven't actually beat the Clippers before.
So you were going, that brings me to my other movie scene. Have you seen the movie for Schmucks?
No, tell me.
It's a dumb movie with okay. So the scene that I'm going to compare this to is at the end. There's a very dumb scene with I believe it's Zach Galifianakis and Steve Carell, and they play people who are not the brightest. And the principle of the movie is you have people who are essentially really dumb, and the higher up people make fun of them. Well, in this scene, there's a thing in the movie where Zach Galifianakis has been, he says he is mind controlling Steve Carell, and then Steve Carell tricks him and says he has brain control. And so there's a big scene where he goes in and he's like, everything you're saying, I'm saying it first. He's like, you're saying the same thing. And he's like, yeah, but I'm saying it first. And they go through there. All of that, the reason I say that is because the Mavs defense has gotten so good lately, but how the Mavs defense has gotten so good is that they take away shots at the rim. Like, they just don't let people go to the rim, and when they do a great job. They're the best team in the league at defending the rim right now,
which is so crazy.
Well, let me rephrase that. They don't get called for foul, which is a big league thing, and it's very weird for me because it turns out that it was not a decades-long conspiracy against the Mavericks that when everyone says that teams that play with force are rewarded, the Mavs are now a team that plays with force, and they're being rewarded. So it turns out that all of my ranting for years and years and years, I might owe an apology. But that's neither here nor there. So they do those two things, and they allow 3-point shots. Well, the Clippers don't go to the rim anyway. They don't shoot free throws, and they shoot threes. So it's basically like the Mavs are going to tell them, hey, this is what you're going to have to live on. And the Clippers are going to be like, hey, that's what we already live on anyway. That's what we do. So it's going to be weird because I think it's, as far as the type of offense that the Clippers play, it's basically going to be an extremely movable object against and I mean, it's just it's going to be very much the Mavs trying to make them do what they already do. The one caveat to that is they do like to use Zubac on the roll a lot, and the Mavs have become super elite at defending the roll man. They're like second in the league at defending the roll man as far as team percentages go. So I do think it'll be interesting there just to see stylistically the Mavs trying to make the Clippers do what the Clippers already do best.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's pretty interesting. I'm I know somebody in the
I
chat.
also,
Somebody in the chat said, "Kirk, are you saying Mavs in 4?" And I'm not that crazy, but I don't know, man. With the way the Mavericks close the regular season, and there's a lot of debate on this because there's a lot of people that cover the league that feel those last 20 games you start to see certain teams pull up, and the Mavericks came out of All-Star break really rickety. Do you remember how awful they started? Sorry, Matt and I are on a slight delay between when we're talking to each other. It's great
yeah,
audio
no,
content.
sorry. Sorry, I try to mute it so that it doesn't have the feedback. I do remember the difficulties that they had early, but I also think a lot of that is just learning to play together. Which the next thing that goes with that, and that I'm scared that this series is going to devolve into, and for all of the luminaries and all of the greatness that should be in this series between Luka and Kyrie and Paul George and Kawhi and all of that, it's really possible that this series comes down to a 3-point shooting contest between PJ Washington, Derek Jones Jr., Dante Exum versus Russell Westbrook, PJ Tucker, and Amir Coffey and Terrence Mann. And if that happens, I still like the Mavs' chances in that, but that's just hilarious. Like, just with all of that stuff going on.
And that's the part. It's a little. I mean, we're being a little reductive here, but I think it's true. And this is where, like PJ Washington's confidence and his sort of, it's very Russell Westbrookian in the sense of the man doesn't seem to shy away from shots when they're not going in, which is probably good, considering how many shots he will get over the course of this game. And he might have one of those sort of, like, you remember Maxey against, I think it was like one of the first 2 or 3 games against Utah, back in the year we went to the Western Conference Finals, where he broke out of his slump. Was that like the 8 3-pointer game? It's like, what is going on here? And like, I sort of think that there's a just completely out of nowhere, but I really think PJ might have a game like that in him. And that's like one of the ways that the Mavericks just break the Clippers early. I'm honestly not, it's not that I'm not worried, because I'm sure the Clippers will draw tons of fouls, but the Mavericks actually have the defenders to throw against the Clippers, because you got Derek Jones Jr., you got PJ Washington. Luka will probably spend some time. Maxey can guard down to the 3. Like, I don't mind. Maxey guarding up scares me more than Maxey guarding down these days, because frankly, since he's come back, since whatever, new toe he had grown, he's looked fantastic on his sort of side to side movement the last month. So I'm really bullish on what the Mavericks can do defensively against the Clippers. It just comes down to if these guys can somehow shut down Luka and Kyrie, which seems insane. I just don't see how the Clippers can do that even with their length. Can one of the other role players for the Mavericks show up just enough, pour in 21 points one night to really sort of break the Clippers back? That's where I'm sort of hanging out. And I see just the guys that the Mavericks have available compared to years past. And I just, maybe I am Mavs in 4. Maybe, I don't know, man. I haven't felt this bullish about this team in a real long time. The Western Conference playoff finals run never made sense to me, but I loved it. And so it's just like where are you sort of sitting right now with how you feel about the way the series can go? Because you've kind of given us both sides. What are your kind of early predictions?
The Mavs are going to win this series. As long as they're healthy, the Mavs will win this series. The reason for that, like, it keeps coming back to me, is one, they can't stop Luka. Kawhi is as equipped as anyone if he's healthy to do it, but that's not the way they play. And if you remember, a lot of times what they did the last couple times they played is they had him on Porzingis first, and then after Tim got hot, they put him on Tim to shut off the second guy. Which that brings me to the biggest thing about this, and it'll help with Luka not being worn down, is in the old games, when Luka runs a lot of guard pick and roll because he likes to bum hunt guards. So what would happen is Luka would run a pick and roll with Tim so that he could pick Reggie Jackson off the menu, or Terrence Mann, or whomever. Because Luka on a guard is actually a much bigger mismatch than Luka on a center. Like, if you have Luka on a small guard, he's
going to score
the best possible scenario.
Yeah.
So the situation with that is, what happened a lot of those is Luka would go, he would create an advantage, he would draw help, and he would kick it back to Tim Hardaway Jr., who had a huge match. And then Tim Hardaway Jr. was still Tim Hardaway Jr. and he wasn't able to do a whole lot because he can't do a whole lot off the dribble. He can't create he's not a good passer. He's a good shooter. He's fine for what he is. But the big difference is now they'll run those same actions, but they'll run them with Kyrie. And once Luka goes and creates help and does all that, the person he'll be kicking it back to is Kyrie. And for all that Tim is and all that Tim isn't, Kyrie is a completely different breed, sort, whatever you want to say it. Kyrie is a different animal as far as getting the ball in those situations with an already bent defense. And that's why I don't think the Clippers will be able to handle it. For what you were talking about with the Mavs, it's the collective length and athleticism that they have and the connectedness that they have is what makes them special relative to years in the past. Because, yes, it really helps that they'll have PJ, because I'm assuming PJ will get the Kawhi assignment. It'll really help that they have him, who's both athletic and bigger. It really helps that they'll have Derrick Jones Jr., although Dorian Finney-Smith did a great job on Paul George. All of that being said, the biggest thing that they have is that they're more than one of those guys. It's not like you're going to look at the Mavs and be like, hey, you've got Reggie Bullock and Dorian Finney-Smith and nothing else as far as wing defense. And we didn't even have Bullock in those series. He wasn't there until the next year. But the point of that is Dorian was kind of on his own because KP couldn't move. And then KP wasn't even really, he wasn't even playing that much towards the end. But KP couldn't move. The Mavs were playing Boban at center. There's just a different level of help, which allows you to have a different level of aggression when you have Gafford and Lively and Washington and Jones and Exum. Like, the Mavs are a length and athleticism and Wade's team now, and that just makes them very, very different.
Well, and I heard somebody told me, I can't remember who said this, but it was after the Warriors Sacramento playing game. And somebody said to me, if the Mavericks get the same whistle that Sacramento got against the Warriors in terms of being able to play physical, then the Mavericks are going to win the finals. And that just tickles me to pieces because we as Mavs fans, you've been a Mavs fan longer than I have because I didn't live into the area until the late 90s. But like a physical Mavs team is like an oxymoron. And the fact that Kidd he got the players, you got the athleticism, and that's what we were always wanting for. But these rule changes have benefited the Mavs in such a way. And I can't wait to see if they're, you don't really out-strength Kawhi Leonard. Like Luka and LeBron are probably like the only two wingish type players that can go strength for strength with Kawhi. But it's going to be really, really something to see in that regard. And I'm really looking forward to it. There was one, I had something right on the tip of my tongue. Oh, Kyrie Irving, which you brought up, I think is something that I've not talked about enough. And that's, Kyrie is almost like a fact of life for me at this point with these Mavericks, similar to Luka, where I don't talk about him enough because I just expect him to go do his thing. And he is going to extract his pound of flesh against the Clippers. It's a question of when. And lately, these last 20 games or so, he was doing it at the moment when teams were simply unable. And it's been really, really fun to watch. And I think that Westbrook, Kyrie Irving bench matchup, where Kyrie is kind of leading the second unit, might be one area where this whole thing is decided, because Westbrook is absolutely going to want to take it to Kyrie, and he's still such a physical player, but he doesn't have Kyrie's skill. That much is obvious. So it's kind of a styles makes fights matchup, because I suspect they kind of spend some time guarding each other too. And I'm really looking forward to that element. Is that something that you have any interest in, or is that further down your list?
No, that actually, that's a lot of fun. For both of them, they're both in fantastic shape. Like we're gonna use another movie thing. So I've always been a Coach Carter basketball fan, and that the whole will run, he makes the team run, and then being in shape and all of that. Westbrook and Kyrie are both in just fantastic shape. So they work, they run. That's Westbrook's greatest talent at this point in his career. Westbrook will be a absolutely worthy Hall of Famer. He's going to be like if the NBA had a real Hall of Fame, where people that actually should be in the Hall of Fame make it. No offense, Michael Cooper, you have no business being in the Hall of Fame. That is just utterly insane. But but Westbrook will absolutely deserve to be there when he eventually gets enshrined. But he's not that guy anymore. He's a different player, but he still plays super hard, and his energy is a really big thing that's super important for the Clippers. Ben at Matt's Moneyball is a big Westbrook fan, has been a big Westbrook fan, wanted the Mavs to get Westbrook. But the big thing for him is just how hard he plays. I mean, and that as a fan, that's one of the few things you can look at and see and be like, hey, what can I do? I can't do that. I can't make shots. I can't do any of this. I can't set a screen. I can't do any of the stuff that the level NBA players do. But in theory, we can all think that we could play hard. I'm not in good enough shape to play it anywhere near as hard as they do. But the point with that is that's why people love people who play hard.
Absolutely.
And for whatever faults you may or may not have, Westbrook plays as hard as anyone's ever played this game. And those matchups will be fun because that's also part of Kyrie is just they run. The Mavs run so much and they get in so much transition because of how hard he runs and how hard he works. So that will be really fun to watch. I would give the Mavs an edge there just because Kyrie's better than Westbrook in 2024.
Well, Kyrie,
I don't.
One of the wilder stats about Kyrie this year, I've not seen the updated numbers, but 2 or 3 weeks ago, I saw some numbers on his 3-point shooting in transition, and he's shooting something like 42 to 44% on pull-up threes in transition. That has just been an absolutely murderous weapon for the Mavericks this year because he's done it at times, and occasionally it feels like a very much the old Jason Terry, no, yes kind of shot, only it might be an even better shot than Terry because Kyrie's just a lot quicker. And I'm really looking forward to that element. We have a gentleman who might be in the chat right now, Henry, who is a big Kyrie super fan. And he's been telling us, he's like, you gotta wait and see for playoff Kyrie. And I'm really looking forward to that because I think that the final thing we should sort of talk about here is playoff Luka Doncic. We've talked a little bit about his defense. We've talked a little bit about what he could do on offense, but what we've not done is pay respect to the man in terms of in his 28-game playoff career, he has, I'm pretty sure, is the second highest playoff scoring average behind Michael Jordan, 32.5 points per game. And these stats a lot better than I do because you spend more time in them, Matthew, but this one absolutely kills me. Do you remember in the 2021 series, that's the series where he averages nearly 36 points, 8 rebounds, and 10 assists. He averaged 36 points while shooting 53% from the free throw line. And that absolutely cracks me up. It's just Luka's such a video game when you look at his numbers, and against this team with how he's playing this year, he always seems to raise his game in the playoffs. The Clippers ought to be really scared because Luka's shooting is on point. He's going to have 2 weeks to where he can rest, and he's going to come out guns a-blazing. And I wouldn't be shocked if they just come out and punch the Clippers right in the metaphorical mouth that forces Ty almost immediately break his game plan because that's how good Luka Doncic has been in the playoffs. For his career in 28 games, nearly half of those games are against the Clippers, by the way. He has 32.5 points, 9.3 rebounds, 7.9 assists on a 55% effective field goal percentage and a hysterical 37% from three-point range. He's just an absolute monster. What kind of Luka do you think we're going to be getting in this playoffs?
The best player in the world. Just to sum up, I expect the best player in the world. Jokic has that belt right now, and he deserves it. Whether or not he deserves MVP, he absolutely deserves the best player in the world title belt right now. I think at the very least in this series, because one of the things that's baked into how the Clippers play is they don't double or hard trap. And because of that, I mean, it's Luka gets to pick whoever he thinks is the worst defender, and he goes at them. Which it's also we have not one thing we have not brought up that is a major difference in my opinion from the previous matchups to this one is Nicholas Batum is not on the Clippers anymore. Batum is one of the very few wings in the NBA that has Luka's size to be able that he can bother Luka size wise. Like he is a huge wing and he can shoot. I think he actually went cold in the second series. I don't think he shot that well, but just in general, he's huge. He could bother Luka and that's all of the minutes that he was able to guard him, which also obviously the primary defender on him was Marcus Morris, and he's gone as well. We all talk about Kawhi and Paul George and all that, but the secret of that is they carry too much of an offensive load to have to guard Luka every position. We talk about Luka wearing down. Even if Kawhi is healthy, if you ask him to guard Luka for a whole position and be apex predator Kawhi on offense, if his knee's not hurt right now, it will be in 2 games. Yeah, like that.
And
That's just
Luka
not
has
a thing. And PG,
he's
made PG fall down like 17 times.
He's been very rude to Paul George since his rookie year. Like, I want to say Paul George was the first player he put on his ass in a big way. I could be misremembering, but I feel like he's had Paul George's number for years.
He has, and I feel like because Paul George is pretty famous for the whole "that's a bad shot" thing, which is not fair to Paul George because Paul George is legitimately a great player, but that's a bad shot, and I could very easily see him throughout this series just being like, "That's a bad shot" after Luka makes something, and so I don't think they have a great matchup for Luka, and because of that. I really think Luka is going to go off. Like, it would not surprise me at all for Luka to average 40 in this series. And I'm not 100% certain that's the best thing for the Mavs either, though, for a variety of other reasons. But Luka is going to have a monster series. I think Kyrie is going to have a monster series, and I think the Mavs are going to win. And if Kawhi is anything short of like right there close to Luka, I don't think it'll be that long. I officially predicted, I don't know if it's came out yet on the Mavs Moneyball thing, I've predicted Mavs at 6. If Kawhi is anything short of just absolutely the best he is, he's going to be he's not going to don't ask for a screen. So there is no honor in basketball. I would point out the whole you don't need the ISO. You don't get bonus points for ISO. Luka's great talent. Somebody a long time ago said it, and I can't remember who it was, and I would give them credit if I could. Playing Luka is like racing somebody who has the starting gun, who gets to choose when the race starts, and that is going to be the big thing for him as far as anybody that's starting. He gets to start the race, and because of that, he's always going to be able. That comment, Tice Summerall, like that legitimately made me laugh. It reminded me very much of the Devin Booker "we're not doubling and open runs" comment, except it's the actual NBA. So that is you've made me laugh.
No, it's great. It's well, and it's what it's done is like, and let's be clear here. I have a very healthy respect for this Clippers team. They have hurt my feelings twice. Game 6 Kawhi in 2022 was one of, if not one, it's one of the most underrated playoff performances ever, only because the Clippers go on to the next round to shit themselves. And that's what's so frustrating, because I think people outside of these two fan bases don't really realize how good these two series have been, because the Clippers died each time right after. And it's very frustrating because the Clippers are really, like, again, you mentioned that run that they went on earlier this year. 26-5? It's great. And you know, I hope the series is short because I would like the Mavericks to win. But I think what we're in store for is just really a chess-based basketball matchup where I think you're going to see Luka come in early and punish the Clippers, and then you're going to see Kyrie absolutely break their backs, and I cannot wait for that. I mean, some of the stuff that Kyrie Irving did in these last several games, like we've not as all of the Mavs fan base was really pushing the Luka MVP narrative. Luka kind of closed the season a little raggedy because he's played a gajillion games and was beat up. And, you know, you remember against the Denver game, like Kyrie pulled them over the finish line on that one, you know, like the Mavericks could not score. And so it's seeing a refreshed Luka, Kyrie, who gets to eat a meal since he wasn't eating, what do you call that? Fasting for Ramadan for several during that period of time, and yet still playing amazing basketball. I don't know. Our fans, you know, I went on Reddit yesterday and made a mistake, and a bunch of people were mad at me. And Kirk's a grump. Kirk says mean things about the Mavericks. I'll tell you what, guys. I think the Mavericks can win a fucking NBA championship right now. That's how hyped I am on this team. Okay, really pumped. I'm really excited, and I think everybody else ought to be too. It's just this is the time of fandom that you ought to lean in on the team being awesome, because we just don't get it. Like, do you remember how awful last year felt at this point in the year? We were just we were glad to be dead. It was an awful season, and now we're here, and this is so great.
Yeah, the deal on that is I'm the last person to try to gatekeep fandom. Like, everybody be fans how you want to be, but just understand that it is rare for teams to win. There's one team in every league that wins a championship every year. So obviously, well, more often than not, approximately 30 to 1, you are going to be sad if you are a fan at the end of the year because your team is going to lose the last game they play. That being said, the Mavs are fun. Live in the moment. Enjoy them.
Yeah.
Have fun. That is what this is fun. The Mavs are they're a super fun team. There's no reason to borrow rain from tomorrow and be like, well, if they play the Nuggets or if they play Boston, like they're not playing them. They're playing the Clippers. And while the Clippers are good enough and your healthy respect for them is absolutely needs to be a thing. Like I know Matt Moore, points out that a lot of people think the Clippers lost those series, but I know you don't think that, and I know I don't think that because I remember the series. But that being said, the Mavs are really good. And the point of this is to go watch it and love it. Like if you want to be a fan, this is the point. Have fun, watch it, and pray for the absolute crazy, insane dream that it ends up being a Mavs Knicks finals, and you get to see Luka and Jalen Brunson go at each other. And
that would be really like it's
there.
A couple of guys in the chat are talking about that, like a Boston or Knicks matchup in the finals would be disgusting, and it would really hurt me. But that's why I watch sports, is for absolute like crazy amounts of drama and to be entertained. It's just a lot of fun. This is a good question down there in the chat. It's worth addressing. So Footang01 says, how come the Mavericks didn't try the last 2 games of the season to get the 4th seed? So the Clippers were playing the Jazz and the Rockets, right? They lost both those games. Not great. The Mavericks would have had to close out and win both their games, which I think they could have done, but Luka was looking ragged. He was physically, I think, pretty banged up. And then I think they wanted to get Kyrie a little bit of rest. That's the longest stretch of basketball Kyrie's played probably since the championship season in Cleveland. Like, he's just played a ton of minutes, and why risk it? I mean, for everybody who remembers the Mavericks Western Conference Finals run, Luka got hurt in the second half of the Spurs game in game 82. Like, it nearly blew everything up. It was awful. So it's like, why chance fate, I think, was the answer. And I found myself, it's very easy to be frustrated in hindsight, but I don't think the Clippers have some tremendous home court advantage that matters. And, the Mavericks get the next weekend games. I'm looking forward to it.
And it moved the Nuggets out of their bracket. So that's the one other thing. Like, we can't, the Mavs losing to OKC was good for them because it moved the Nuggets out of the bracket, which, the Nuggets are monsters, man. Like, the biggest thing to be scared of as a Nuggets fan is they have 6 players, and it's really hard for people to be healthy for that long, because they played a long season last year. Obviously, they're playing a long season this year, and so the later you get them, the better, I think. But that's obviously thinking way far ahead. The Mavs need to win the series. The Mavs they have not done enough to earn thinking forward, second series, third series, anything like that. But this is it's just time to be fun and enjoy it. But it is also a nice little caveat to see that, hey, in the second round, the Nuggets are further away. There's a better chance for somebody to upset them. And I really, if it does go that far, like if the Mavs do happen to get there, I think Mavs and Thunder is a really, really fascinating series, and I would really, really like to watch it.
I saw one.
We'll worry about that later.
I saw one really hilarious, because I love reading Twitter comments, even the mean ones, where it was like somebody, it was in reference to Luka, but it said, "Fat boy better get to the finals now, because this might be the easiest path he ever has." And that cracked me up, because when you looked at like the race 2 weeks before, it was like, oh no, the Mavericks have an impossibly hard path to the playoffs. Then the Nuggets messed around and lost to the Spurs. And I think Mavericks Thunder would be truly fascinating in a second round series. And then I do think the Mavericks can beat the like Denver or anybody on that side of the bracket as well, even though I can't believe I'm saying that. Like, the Wolves just owned the Mavericks the first half of the year before they got bigger with PJ and with PJ and with Gafford. So it's I don't want to project ahead too far, but that comment I think is actually pretty on point, because it's like, if you're outside of the Timberwolves and the Nuggets, on that's like 2 of the best teams in the league before you get to the Western Conference Finals, like that's pretty amazing. You there?
I will never be scared of playoff Rudy Gobert. Okay. Yeah, I will never be scared of playoff Rudy Gobert.
Yeah. Oh, we got some. Well, I mean, that's what, and that's why I keep thinking about that comment where it's like the Western Conference is only going to get more ridiculous every year. Like this year, it feels like 4 of the teams that are not in it are not in it due to like injury related reasons. And the Mavericks have had mediocre health, not good, not bad. But then you look at like the Thunder, like the dirty secret that a lot of Mavs fans really focus on in terms of the SGA MVP argument, which I think is fair, is that the top 10 players on the Thunder all played 70 plus games. Like that's going to help you win a whole bunch. Whereas the Mavericks missed Kyrie for 26 games. They missed the Maxey for nearly 38 games, something like that. So it's really, it's just like injury luck is just such an important factor in the playoffs. And, let's look forward to this. Do you have any closing thoughts before we get out of Dodge?
The only thing I do is, again, I would double down on just really enjoy it and expect to see Luka and Kyrie be the best offensive duo in basketball, and just watch. I mean, they're masters of their craft, and that's what we're here for, is to watch their greatness.
So I think the last time 2 teammates scored 40 points together in a playoff series or in a playoff game had to have been the LeBron Kyrie 2016. I could be wrong on this, but I hope we get
Game 7.
Yeah,
the 41.
I hope we get a game like that. Like the internet will break if those 2 just go off like that. And the Mavericks might need it because the Clippers are also really good at offense. All right. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, guys. This is longer than I intended to keep Matthew. I should probably get back to work. But it's a little quiet Friday afternoon. So we'll see here, guys. Please be ready to tune in to Josh and I, or maybe Matthew and I, if Josh can't go, after the Mavericks game. They play at 2:30 Central on Sunday, which is just kind of the marquee slot. Can't wait for that. That means not podcasting till 2 a.m. Love that. It means I get to go to bed. I'm old. Thank you for joining during the day, everyone. And for anybody listening on the podcast stream, just be looking for that Tim Bontemps interview if you haven't heard it. I thought it was fun. Tim's a nice guy. All right, we'll be good. Everybody have a great first part of your weekend. Enjoy Saturday basketball and maybe some sunshine, and we will talk on Sunday. Go Mavs.